Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for coming to our workshop here on Monday the 19th at 6 p.m. So our primary and pretty much sole item of discussion for tonight, as was set at the council meeting on August 5th, is we're going to walk through the draft of the preliminary 2025 budget, get your comments, your feedback, any things you would like to see changed, clarified, etc. in advance of the September 3rd council meeting when we will adopt the preliminary budget and levy as required by state statute. So in front of you, I do have a number of documents, the budget documents in front of you. I have it on the screen as well, so I have it in the Excel format, so if we want to make any changes on the fly or anything, I can easily do so you can see that. But we're just going to walk through it as you have it in front of you. So it starts with the general fund. That's primary, our focus, our discussion, and we'll talk briefly about the other funds. But general fund, that's our operating fund. So we're going to focus on that tonight. What I'm going to do is just kind of walk through it. I'm not going to go exactly line by line. I'll just call out things if they ever had a significant change to them. And then there's some of the significant things in the budget we'll talk about as we go. Different things at some of the different departments. So, unless there's any questions right off, I'll just jump right in. Okay, so starting with Fund 100, that's our general fund. That first page starts with revenues. So again, that first line is that property tax revenue. During this period, we always list that as zero because that'll end up being what the levy is. So to determine that levy, we keep that number zero to start. Again, as I'll present on September 3rd, when we're creating the budget, we're creating what the levy is. The levy is, expenditures, take expenditures, subtract any non-tax revenue, and then whatever's left that's what we need our tax levy to be. So looking at our revenues, some of these, for example, like P&I delinquent taxes, those are just, we're doing that based off of year-over-year actuals. So that's why we increased that. Some of the things you'll see, like tax forfeiture sales, I just kept it as is. It's been that way last couple of years. You'll see it's zero right now. It's because the county normally does their budget or their sales in like August, September. So a lot of these you see year-to-date numbers, that's the June 30th, so the mid-year point. So the county had not done any land sales as of then. And then we don't necessarily get our portion of that land sales until we get our December tax settlement. Licenses and permits, those are short-term rentals. Just talked to Pete today, we're at 36 short-term rentals right now. So we anticipate that'll be roughly the same number for next year. Business license and permits, those are mainly liquor licenses that are on a kind of a 2-year. So on even years, we don't do them. So that's why you'll see even in like odd years, we don't do them. So 2023 is 0, 2022, 12,000. This year, that 2,200, it's like mainly the North Star and some of those other ones that got a liquor license for the first time. So kind of an off year. Golf cart permits, we did surpass 700 permits this year. We actually had Deb actually had to order an additional 50. So we estimated this number based off of 700 again. We don't want to go over. We want to just have a little bit of a cushion there. So we based that off of 700 golf cart permits. Land use went up slightly just because that's what we're seeing. What we've been seeing so far is an increase in variances and things like that. Building permits, that went up a little bit based off of both what we've seen year over year as well as what we've seen this year. We're continuing to see a decent building market. Pete, do you know how many, I guess I didn't look, new builds we have so far this year?
Off the top of my head.
I think we're over 20 though.
Yes.
So we're over 20 yet again. So we consider between that, new builds and remodels, we've been seeing quite an uptick. I know Pete's been busy this summer. LGA, that line went down a little bit. This originally, what this mostly is the state in 2023, the legislature created a new sales tax in the metro area, and that a certain percentage of that is used for transportation in greater Minnesota. Originally, they anticipated we were going to get like 99,000 this year. It was a slow rollout. We just got our first payment in July. And I think it was for like 20,000. I can't remember exactly, Jeanette, if you saw that, how much that was for. But they're estimating for our payment next year to be about 60. So that's something they do consider. As this sales tax keeps going, they do anticipate will grow. Let's see any significant changes along these lines. I don't think there's any significant changes. Police PERA, that goes up a little bit every single year. The Pelican Police contract, we are proposing a $2,500 increase to the next year, just because our costs keep going up. And Chief Sandel's been in communication with the township board, so they know to anticipate that kind of an increase. Looking at other revenues, nothing super significant other than looking at what we got year over year. The biggest one will become from this, you'll see a reduction from 130 to 5,000 here in this transfer from other fund. This 5,000 is the transfer from the cemetery fund to the general fund to help cover some of the costs Public Works does at the cemetery. And then last year you transferred $125,000 from the capital fund in 2024. That was partly to cover the wage increases that went into effect at the beginning of this year. So that's revenues. Any quick questions on revenues? Okay, now we're going to expenditures. Start off with City Council. Very little bit of change. Only change there was just based off of PERA, what council members are actually choosing to elect PERA. Otherwise, the budget is the same there. On the admin side, and you'll see this, I'll just cover this now, and then obviously I won't have to hit it for the rest of the departments. For each department under compensation, when we did the wage structure change, we moved to a January 1 anniversary for everyone, so everyone takes their step increase on January 1. So you have those are incorporated, as well as the already negotiated 3% COLA. So those are incorporated here. Also in the wages then affect the PERA and FICA and Medicare. So those are based off of wages. So any changes you see there, you'll see changed in FICA and Medicare. Also, there's not a whole lot of change if you look at the other departments as well on health and dental. We are having to change our healthcare provider this year. Health Partners, who we've had for a number of years, decided that they're dumping pretty much all small group in greater Minnesota. So unless you're a large group and they like you, they're dumping you. So we were forced to find a new provider for this upcoming year. We did worked with our broker, our health insurance broker, and we think the best course would be move to Blue Cross Blue Medica. We looked at Medica, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and which one am I missing? They're the least best option. United, was it United? Yeah, United, thank you. So those are the three that really provide service to this area. Medica got us as close to our current coverage and is actually essentially a wash between this year and next year. So we won't see an increase in premiums by switching to Medica. And then it also provides roughly as much of the same benefit as Health Partners did to the employees. So that's that. You'll also see across the departments slight increases in training and education. Again, that comes down to an increased emphasis on professional development. That was one thing that was pointed out in the organizational assessment, was to continue encouraging training and education, professional development opportunities. So that also goes into dues and subscriptions, so membership dues and such. You'll see that across the board. Elections, obviously we don't have any elections in 2025, so there's no cost there. The biggest thing you'll see, and I sent it out earlier today, I do apologize I didn't get out earlier, but I was working on it even over the weekend. On the administration side, so on August 5th at the council meeting, when you accepted Assistant City Administrator Ike's resignation, I mentioned that I wasn't going to request authorization to post the position right away because I wanted to take the opportunity to evaluate it and see what of our needs and if anything needed to change. Again, there's no critique on Administrator Ike and what he's done for the city, just again, looking at, he had a specific set of skills and what kind of things should we shift things around? Is there a new emphasis that I think we need? So in front of you, I do have a memo. I am actually making a recommendation to reorg the position from an assistant city administrator to a finance director clerk position. In the memo lines out all my reasonings. Mainly it comes down to when I looked at what ACA Ike was doing, as well as what I think some of the stuff I was doing, and one of the things I think we need more emphasis on. I think it came down to definitely more on the finance side. Jeanette does a fantastic job as our finance specialist in doing the day-to-day financials. I think especially as we've been talking about City Hall, Bushman, streets, CIP, I think it'd be really nice I think it'd be beneficial to the city to bring in that next level of expertise, an accountant, a finance director, to really walk the city through those things. I think at this stage of the game, I've pretty much maxed out my financial acumen. I'm very familiar, obviously, with municipal finance, but being able to have someone who can take that the next level, I think would be very beneficial for the city. Take some of the load off of Jeanette as well, with all that she has to do, especially when it comes to things like audits and all that.
I have a question.
Yes.
How would this person work with you, Jeanette? What is that?
So with this position, again, this position would then supervise the overall finances. So I'm not recommending any changes to the finance, to any job descriptions. There might be need to change to the administrator description, but in this situation, you would see, like in most finance director positions, you still have a finance specialist who's doing the accounts payable, all of that day-to-day stuff. The finance director is the one who's reviewing it, signing off on it, doing that additional level analysis of, for example, again, the CIP. Where's the money coming from to fund the CIP? How are we funding street projects?
Are you doing that currently?
Currently
okay,
I'm
so
doing
it's
that.
going. Okay.
Yeah, so they would be taking those duties and, again, having a more financial expertise around them. What that also allow me then, or the administrator's position to then do, is really take back and focus on the things like research and policy analysis, special projects management, working with the council on different initiatives, which right now some of that stuff I have had to, as assistant city administrator, Ike's been doing that, so it allow things that maybe really should lie with the city administrator, allow me to take them back. So that's my recommendation with that. I did do a wage analysis and job type description analysis, just like I did a year ago when we did the wage analysis. So you see I do have that proposed salary range for the position based off of that, which would actually be about $5 lower than the current 2025 assistant city administrator salary range. So there may be some savings there. It's not necessarily why I'm recommending it, but that's, based off of my analysis of the organization right now, that's, I think, what would be best served in the short term as well as the long term. There are obviously other avenues you could take. You could look at, there are companies like Abdo who's provided us assistance with accounting, can do a consultant service where they essentially act as your finance director from afar, and they do a lot of those services. Actually talked with the administrator in New Hope. The city of New Hope, Abdo serves as their finance. They have like 4 internal finance staff, but Abdo is their finance director. So it's not uncommon for cities even the size of New Hope, 30,000 people, to do that. There would be some savings in that, based off of talking even to Abdo, what kind of, I don't have a formal proposal, but talking to them about what we would do and what they've done for other cities our size, probably be in that $75,000 to $90,000 range. So when you take into wages and then benefits, you'd be saving probably close to, maybe $50,000 or more. On the defect, you lose a body in-house. They're a part-time position. So there are other options from that finance side that you could pursue as well if you don't see the benefit of a full-time director.
I have some comments. I was looking around the different cities. I guess, in my opinion, it's not that I disagree with this, but I think we should have more information before we proceed with anything like this. Pequot has a city administrator, city clerk treasurer, Nisswa, city administrator, clerk treasurer, Cross Lake, city clerk, deputy clerk treasurer. Have we looked at, expanding the finance specialist duties, another admin position, the contract piece, if it's not needed, all year. But I guess I would like to see, different options at the September 3rd meeting, besides just what was proposed, so we have something to compare it to.
Okay.
And then also, who would be then taking over the day-to-day social media website interface for the residents side of
Yep,
it?
that's something that would be worked out, whether it
Okay.
be myself. Maybe that's something that we train in Deb to do. That's something that can be moved around as well.
Okay. And then, Jeanette, have you guys discussed the promotion that potentially Jeanette could then move to a finance director role?
Well, if we created this position, obviously there would be an opportunity, if she wanted to pursue that. But the part of it is, before we even discuss that, I think there's an element of, is this, because then it's not just promoting a position, it's creating, I wouldn't want to just promote Jeanette to finance director and not have the finance specialist position. You get what I'm
Okay.
getting at?
Yeah.
So if we created this position, then if Jeanette wanted to pursue that position, we'd absolutely have that discussion.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of would echo Mr. Jensen's comments. I think it's good to have in the budget for this, but I think more discussion around what that staff and headcount looks like, how the reorg will take effect. I don't know if we want to make a small subcommittee. Personnel committee would be great on this one, or just discuss it a whole in September.
I think it's, in my opinion, just too quick to make a decision. I mean, we need more information.
And I will say, is this something that you want to be able to make a decision in September, or we put this in? Again, the September is not your final budget. So it can only, you can put it in as it is now. And then, September, October, November, decide, okay, we actually want to do this position, and then drop it.
But could we just budget for another body? So basically,
Yeah, I
like
would
we
say
budget
this
for,
is kind of like the most
position.
expensive option.
Okay.
Anything other than this would be less.
Okay.
So you can always back it down.
Yeah, for preliminary budgeting purposes, I would recommend leaving it, but the actual.
No, and as we have further budget discussions, yeah, we do present up the other options, and then the council can select what you think is best.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Okay. Back to the preliminaries. So I think that covered administration. City attorney, based off of year-over-year actuals and what we're seeing the city attorney is doing, I'm recommending an increase to $30,000 for the city attorney services. Other government, you'll see liability assurance across the board. That goes up a little bit every single year. Sometimes so I'm recommending a little increase on that right now because we don't know exactly what that's going to look like at this time. On the audit and accounting side, a little bit increase there. It covers the audit, and then some accounting assistance. Really, one of the things that we had in here is looking at one of the recommendations that also came out of the organizational assessment, and I think Jeanette and I agree should be done, is the city's chart of accounts really needs to be updated. So we had a proposal from Abdo to be able to provide that service, to do that for us. So that's part of what that is in there for. If if we went the finance director route, if you choose that, maybe that's something that person can do and we don't have to do that service, but that's just in there right now. That is also split between general fund and sewer because finance covers both of that. Looking at it, animal control, you'll see there's a slight increase, there's an increase there. Again, what that is per the contract, there's a slight increase in the contract with animal control. But also, if you remember at the beginning of this year, we were told Babinski Foundation, which had long time took the animals, said no more. So we had to sign a contract with Hart, which did have a fee. That was done after the beginning of the year, after the budget was adopted. So this year, this includes the animal control contract as well as Hart and some Hart impound costs. Fire district went up a little bit. I'll be honest, guesstimated there. I haven't received their final number, what's been adopted for the fire district. I anticipate that that'll be much lower than 330 because of with the capital fund and that cost. It's only operating that should go up. So that is a number that will likely probably go down than from what's in there right now. But I wanted to make sure that there was enough in there so we're not having to increase it later and then having a problem with that.
So IT support, I was just curious, should we would this include any type of HR support? Where would HR support?
IT support.
Should we decide that that would be something that we could look at?
IT support is what we pay on systems to be our IT provider.
Okay. I just saw support too. So is there a line that should we look at any type of HR services?
Professional services.
Given that we don't have a personnel committee, where would that be budgeted under?
Professional services.
Okay. And currently we have nothing in there for HR services?
Currently not, because it's something the council has discussed putting in there.
Okay. I guess I would like to hear from you guys too. I think that it would be worth looking at.
You know, where would we get these services? Sourcewell? Is that somebody?
So I have, when this was brought up earlier in the year as well,
Yeah.
I looked, there are companies that provide HR services, but I'm not sure they're what the council is looking for. All the services I've seen from HR firms, like Abdo has an HR wing. David Drown and Associates does DDA Human Resources, GMP Human Resources, GovHR. The human resources they are generally providing are like compensation studies, recruitment services, reviewing of personnel policies. They're not being your HR director. I won't say I haven't exhausted my search, but I haven't seen anyone yet that does that. I have previously at the beginning of the year when you inquired, reached out to colleagues. Didn't really get any headway with colleagues either. So we can still do more. I'll obviously do more research, but I'm just not sure at this point. Maybe I'm not looking in the right locations for this kind of a service. But I definitely need to do more research to, I think, find the service that the council is looking for.
Well, I think without a personnel committee, it would be more, the code of conduct stuff. Basically, if there's issues between staff, the administrator has an issue, with staff. It's just a gray area with the, that issue without a personnel committee for staff, and it goes two ways with administrator. How are things handled? What's the proper, procedure? We did amend it in February where staff could go to council, but, councils had no training. I mean.
Well,
That was the same with personnel committee too. An issue with personnel is they would go to one person on the personnel committee and only talk to them. So.
well, and I think it's not just Breezy Point, right? I mean, you look at Nisswa, and I've heard of other cities where they've gone to certain council members and it circumvents the city administrator, which we don't want that either, right? Like if it's actually something that should be, talked about with the city administrator, but if they're going to, council members, it's not always handled in the way that maybe it should be. And like, I'm not trained HR. And so I just think that it would be at least good to look at what are the options just to handle.
Third party,
Yeah.
at least look at it. Because were you on the personnel committee?
And there are just certain things that ultimately, the council's the ultimate authority on certain things. So they obviously can have assistance, but ultimately, there's a certain things the council will never be able to hand off. Fire and fire authority stays with the city council, that's statute. So things like that, there's a certain things the council will never, we can get assistance for it, but ultimately decisions will have to be live with the city council.
And I think that's understood by us, but I think it would be good for guidance,
Yeah,
if,
no.
if we needed additional guidance of who that contact and resource would be. I know we discussed it when we removed that personnel committee. I think that was a concern, maybe even Mr. Scott's, of who, or maybe it was all of us that we kind of concluded. So, which prompted the initial research, but I think it would be something good to budget something for, and to continue to pursue in having that. Regardless if a personnel committee came back or not, I think it's good to have something, at least a resource, even if it's time and material, at least a resource on file for it, if not a retainer.
Well, and I think too, if we had a personnel committee, at least having the resource for the committee to have that, I mean, here's how you handle this situation, or like just even the guidance of how does the personnel committee handle certain situations, but.
Do you have a number you'd like to, 10,000? Again, I don't know what that number is.
What is in professional services?
Professional services right now, in professional service, there really isn't much. So it was left over from last year again for these kind of things. So I think you probably could leave it.
Probably enough.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yep.
At least look into it,
Contracted, like just.
yes.
Yeah.
But it gives staff, resource, it gives the administrator resource, it gives direction to council, somebody to, what is the next steps? I don't think any of us, as Angel said, are HR, and after being involved in that termination hearing, it was just awkward, it would have been nice to have, I think, HR.
We were only 2 weeks in though, too,
Yeah.
some of us, so that was
Nope, I
not
understand that. Okay.
ideal either.
Step down. Got it. Okay, moving down the list, no other significant changes. Building maintenance, we got to reduce that because obviously the city hall expansion project is going to reduce a lot of any maintenance that's going to need to be done to this building. We just do have a little bit of money in case there's something that actually, in the meantime, something breaks that needs to be fixed. We can fix it. I'm going to skip over these two items for now because that's going to get back into our other discussions about CIP and debt and things like that. So we'll explain these two. I want to get through the rest of it and then we'll explain that. Planning and zoning. One reduction, we had $10,000 in last year for seasonal. That was really going to be for when Peter stepped in. If we needed some consulting services with Jerry during his onboarding, but I don't really see any reason for that this year. If we can remove that. We got a reduction in health and dental. That's again just based off of personnel. Excuse me. And then building inspector, when your building permits go up, your inspector costs go up because his fees are based off of building permit fee. So that's pretty much any of the significant changes. And again, professional development and wage increases, obviously, with every department. Moving into public safety, obviously, again, regular cost increase for regarding wages. We left the overtime, again, that $35,000 in there for the overtime, specifically those side-by-side shifts. We weren't necessarily comfortable, I think, at this point, upping that because we've only had 2 months of that since the side-by-side, and I think based off of what we've seen so far, I don't know, Chief, if you want to speak to how those shifts are going, seems appropriate still.
They're going well. It seems the public that they're contacting, it's well received. They like seeing our guys out there. We have had 0 violations where officers have cited anybody or any problems that they've come across at that time. But like everything else, they're there for that moment in time. Some things still may be occurring that they're not witnessing, but as far as the time they've spent there, they haven't encountered any problems.
Perfect.
Moving on the list, training and education, again, we talked about that going up for everybody. I think the biggest one is professional services, but I'm gonna hand that back over to Chief, and he's gonna describe what that large increase is for and who caused it, not us.
And I'm gonna change it up a little bit when we're talking about budgets and go to the positives right away, because you don't get to hear a lot of those during budget. And this ties into the professional services. So we have applied for a number of grants through Sourcewell. And just so we're clear, grants are not guaranteed. And some of our grants are reimbursable, so we need to pay the cost up front. And the reason I say that is we still need to budget for these projects, even though we're probably going to be receiving funds for it. In the end, we'll save the city a tremendous amount of money, but for the matching funds through Sourcewell, it's not a 50-50. I don't know how they come up with the calculation. They give us more than 50%. So we have some building and maintenance that needs to be done. The stucco is falling off. The corners are breaking up. And we've got a company here that with a proposal of $38,950 to repair our stucco. That would come out of our building maintenance funds, which are $45,000. We also need one more furnace next year. It will be the final one to be replaced. We wouldn't be able to do that without receiving this grant from Sourcewell. So we applied for the grant. We have received that money. It was $29,212.50, leaving the city's responsibility at $9,737.50. So we can do that and get the furnace and still have money left over in our building repairs. And then RMS, which our records management, our records management system we have currently is countywide. It's very old, it has a lot of problems, so we needed to transition to a new one. The problem is the old one we had was very inexpensive. All the new stuff is quite a bit more expensive. We've been given some cost by the county and what the county administrator recommended. She recommended the county picking up the implementation costs, maintaining our old records management system, which we have to do for a period of years to get that data transferred over, and a few other things. So the problem with that whole scenario is until the county board says, yes, we will do that, it doesn't mean a lot. So we need to be able to plan for potentially more than what they have proposed. What they have proposed is basically $30,000 towards us. We applied for a grant through Sourcewell. We were promised $20,000, which keeps the city's cost at $10,000. If that occurs, and even if the county, if we receive the grant and the county's does come in a little higher with the $30,000 in there, we should be able to cover whatever adjustments we need to make. So there's another Sourcewell grant for $20,000 there. We just received our shields. I don't know if everyone was aware. That was through the Minnesota State Aid funding. We applied for a grant once again through Sourcewell, received $10,000, which was half the cost of those shields or thereabouts. Long and short of it is there's $10,000 we didn't have to take out of the state aid funds, so it's there for other projects as well. And then Sergeant Garcia is also writing a grant and seeking funding for a new heart monitor. The new heart monitors, the higher end ones, are currently $54,000. So hopefully he receives that. Now we have to think too, we have 3 people that use those. So down the road we may need to purchase some, but we're giving a grant a whirl for that. So just of the stuff we've been promised and received, it's just under $60,000 that we'll be getting back in grants. So the professional services funds for the records management system, the $30,000 is the primary jump in our budget for professional services, just so you're aware. And obviously there's some minor increases to other things and some training. Part of the city's, we'll start with one of the biggest liabilities the city faces is an officer's use of force. And there's mandates for realistic training, hands-on decision-making type training. So part of the increase in the professional service was $2,500 on an annual thing to Axon for our new tasers. It's a kind of like that system we have. It's a virtual reality. Things change. Officers have to make decisions. The more of that type of training we have, the less liability we have if force is used, and generally speaking, the better job our officers are going to do when they're confronted with something on the street. So it's an important thing for us to be doing. Any questions?
Yeah, I know that I had talked to you a little bit about the speedometer, the speed signs.
Yeah, we've got that part of capital, so when we get to capital, we'll talk
Okay,
about
so
that
it's
then.
not, okay, so
Yep.
it's gonna be in a different, okay.
Yep.
The records management fee increase, is that something that you're referencing that the county might pick up some of that, or?
Correct.
is
So-
that like- Okay, so it's good to budget for as much as we could potentially be responsible for, but it might
Right.
come down.
Our minimum will be the 30,000,
Okay.
basically. And then, just so you're aware, this is a countywide system that we pretty much have to go with because it ties in the county attorney's office, the dispatch, the jail. So when dispatch receives a 911 call, they punch the information in, it gets sent to our computers. We need that system to be tied in with them in order to receive that information. So, like I say, my belief is with that grant and the 30,000, we should be covered, with the increases. If there are increases, I should say.
Okay. I think I covered pretty much all the changes for public safety. You'll see under capital outlay, that's down to 0. Again, let's go to how we're doing the capital plan now. Instead of putting it here, I'm going to talk about later, once we're getting through these, where the capital's going. So for Public Works, some changes there. What we did, obviously, there's the step increases, COLA, but also we looked at relocating, reallocating some wages to parks based off of actual time being spent on parks. So you'll see that Public Works went down a little bit, but parks went up. So a reallocation kind of based off of actual time being spent. So that covered obviously compensation and then PRA, Medicare, and their insurances. Let's see, any public, we talked about that. Equipment repairs and maintenance, we upped that a little bit just because some of the repairs that we're seeing. We talking to Joe, I think we got a lot of the significant repairs have been on, have been done, but sometimes there's just a lot of things that come up even this year that we don't anticipate. Don't anticipate the main, what was it on the Joe on the dump truck that failed?
The liftway.
Yeah, you don't
Buckle.
you don't anticipate those things happening. Otherwise, we talked about, Joe and I went through based off of the current aggregate materials, blacktop repair, felt appropriate that the current level is appropriate there. And everything, dust coating, same thing. It's a lot of those repairs or that level maintained. So we're able to maintain a good amount on the Public Works side. On fuel for both PD and Public Works, as of June 30, we felt down a little bit on the fuel, but at this point, I think it's something we wanted to maintain at its current level, just because you never know where fuel is going. It was cheaper earlier in the year; it's gone back up again a little bit, so we felt appropriate just to maintain the current level for fuels. So that's Public Works, and I think we'll also talk about it. Capital outlay and roads in just a minute. I want to make sure we get to the rest of the expenditures and we can talk about those specific things. Yes, ma'am. Mayor.
One more thing. I was wondering from the Night to Unite, can we look at having a bigger budget for you guys so that we can put together more activities or more giveaways or more things that would, grow it?
From my experience over the years, Night to Unite, generally is weather dependent on how many people show up, and some years we've had fantastic turnouts and other years not so much. To me, Night to Unite is our citizens interacting with our law enforcement, our fire department, our first responders, not necessarily putting on a great big show. We want those people there interacting with our community.
Right.
I'm not looking to add a bunch of stuff to, I think sometimes that kind of detracts from what we're doing there.
I've just been to some other ones and they've had just a little bit more, things to interact with and the kids to do, or, things that the kids can take home. Not that it would want to distract, but I was just asking the question since, it is a budget thing. So if there are things that, you need extra of, whether that's the ice cream or little fire trucks that you give away or whatever the case may be, so that you have more to,
And the ice cream wasn't an issue. I could have received the
Right,
ice cream,
and that was just an example.
Right, it's the people to do some
It's
of
easier
it,
to
but-
do this now and say, here's $500
Yeah.
for next year's Night to Unite, rather than, weeks before, a month before, saying, hey, can we do this, can we do this, and then coming back to council. I think it's no different than the butterfly event.
I have no problem if you want to add $500 to the budget for Night to Unite. Some of it maybe goes to the fire department, some of it to us, so they can buy trinkets for the kids. I still want it related to
Yeah.
public safety.
Yeah,
That's
I understand. I just,
Right, so-
more of,
and I-
again, it's so we
Yeah.
don't have to come back to it next year, that it's already there. It's available, so if there is something that you would like to purchase that adds to the event, that, enhances it, then you have that available.
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
So what would you like, I'm thinking that'd probably go under general operating. How much would the council like to put in there for that?
What was their budget this year?
9,000. And then we just kept it the same.
Okay.
So we were saying that the general operating, so can we
would-
just
we
do
would
like
house this under-
9,500?
Yeah, if you want to add, if you want
Yeah.
$500 for 19 you go 9,500.
Right.
If you want $1,000 for 19 10,000. I'm trying to hear how much would you
Yeah.
like for?
I mean, I would say
I'm saying it's gonna go
500.
Under general operating, how much would you like to designate for 19?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 500, and I would say too, for the butterfly event, I would recommend doing that as well. I mean, I think that, there's things that we can continue to do as a city. We don't have a lot of events, and so I think it is important that, there is a little bit there, that if something does come up, that we're able to get that, especially when it comes to the kids.
So on that, Madam Mayor, so you brought up the butterfly release, which is normally covered by the cemetery fund. Are you asking for dollars in the general fund to help compensate for that? Or are you asking the cemetery commission to put an additional $500?
I think I would just rather us allocate it out of the general fund, just because, again, it is something that, and it depends on the council, it depends on the committees, it depends, people come up with new ideas during, every year there's something going on, and sometimes it's just nice to have it, and if we don't use it, we don't use it, but I think it's easier than,
I don't know as if that needs to be in the general fund. I think it could come out of the cemetery fund and the
Yeah, and that's fine too.
the commissioners make that decision.
okay, because we didn't ask
I
them.
think you could add it into the budget for cemetery, right?
Yeah,
I think
correct.
that makes sense too. Did you say there's 9,000 in the general operating for public
Yeah, general operating is,
safety? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at the wrong one.
and that has seemed to be sufficient for the last.
It's just nice we don't have to come back to a council meeting and say, hey, can I have $100 for this, or 200 for that, or,
Well, I think to Chief Sandel's point about attendance this year, I believe there was a football camp going on for, I don't know what age group, the young age group, and I think that impacted, the attendance.
Yeah.
So,
That was K through 8.
yeah, so it was
It was
a lot of people.
A lot of kids, a lot of families.
well, it's there for you to use it if you would like to.
Thank you.
Moving on to parks, pretty much kept mostly the same, with again, one difference just being reallocation of some wages and benefits from Public Works to Parks. So again, what you saw was Public Works go down a little bit, but then Parks go up. So that's really just the change there. And talk about capital, we talk about the capital fund. So with that brings, I think we can move into the capital now. That brings us, that's pretty much the general operating, the general fund budget. So I'm gonna go back to, it's the expenditures, other government, I don't know exactly, I think what.
Can I ask one more question? So this year, or last year, we gave Parks and Rec 50,000, right? It was the largest we've ever allocated to Park and Rec. I think that it is important for us going forward that we are continuing to allocate.
We have that in the capital
Is
fund.
that in there? Okay,
Yep.
so we're just gonna keep it the same?
Yep, we're about to talk about that right now.
Perfect, okay.
So, as we presented the draft of the capital fund back in July, we talked about the idea, and I have that in front of you, the most updated version of the capital, is by doing it in this way, you can essentially set, whatever, with lack of a better term, a levy, a specific amount of money you're gonna levy every single year to cover capital, keep it roughly flat, but then be able to fund everything every single
I'm sorry,
year.
which document are you
Sorry.
looking at?
Now you're looking at the 11x17 document,
The big one?
the big one.
Okay.
First
And,
page.
The very front one with the staple. So
This first page?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So it has a yellow highlight on the top. So again, the benefit of this is that yellow highlight, you can put that in the budget every single year versus essentially what we do now is this lower level expenditure, and every single year it changes, which then makes your levy go up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's the biggest impact to your levy year over year is your capital, because those are your expensive things. So in this current one, as we presented back in July, it has all the things that we've been able to identify at this point. Kind of the idea of starting seeding cash balance of $1 million. If you took $1 million from the current capital fund and just said this is for the equipment capital and stuck it over here, $270,000 over the, essentially actually 21 years, all the way through 2045, you float it. You can pay for everything listed in this fund, in this plan with cash. So looking at just for 2025, we do list about $365,000 worth of equipment. In administration, that's broken up through software, and then the remaining balance of the zoning code updates. Some of that was covered this year. The rest of it will be covered next year. I'm just going to pause there for the software. The other thing you have in your packet is a memo regarding an ERP acquisition, ERP Enterprise Resource Planning System. Again, right now that's our financial software. I think we've talked about before, our current system is Banyan. It's very basic and antiquated. Banyan's operating system essentially is Microsoft Access. That's what it is. And that's all it does, is basic financial stuff. There's no permitting, there's no the HR side of things. It does payroll, but it doesn't manage really any other HR documents. There's no records management capabilities. Code enforcement, there's no online portal for customers. Even online, like our credit card payments, we use a company called RevTrack, which is also not ideal. We use it for sewer. It's not great. Jeanette can tell you every time she does sewer billing, she gets the request of, hey, can I do online payments? Hey, can I do auto pay? Can I do an ACH transfer? And right now the answer is no. You can do some level of online pay through RevTrack, which is what we have now, but it doesn't work well. It's not user intuitive, and it doesn't integrate directly with our financial software. Jeanette has to essentially be doing downloads and download into Banyan, and just it takes a lot of time and it's inefficient.
How much time does that take you, Jeanette?
To do process one day, probably 10 minutes.
Okay.
When I come in on a weekend and I have 3 days to process,
Okay. And that's quarterly?
every day.
Oh, every day.
Day I pull payments in to see if there's any that people have made.
Oh, really? So every day you're pulling payment? Okay, that is very inefficient. Okay.
And again, it doesn't do any of the other things. So like and essentially right now, all of our records, all of our P&Z processes are 100% paper. So your building permits, paper, your plant, any zoning administrator, like anything that related building and zoning, it's 100% paper. And as you've all known, by coming in, getting a golf cart permit, filing for office, anything like that, it's cash or check. Which again, how many times we've had people come in for a golf cart permit, have to leave, go to Pelican Square, get 20 bucks and come back. Happens regularly. So what we're doing, we are recommending upgrading the city's current system. Assistant Mr. Ike is here if you want to go into any of the integrated steps we took. But we took a multi-level, a very methodical process to reviewing different systems. Myself, Jeanette, we've had the experience integrating different ERPs ourselves for different organizations, so we're very familiar with that process. But very much what we did is we talked to staff, we said, what are we looking for? What are our goals here? We're trying to get paperless as much as possible, be able to allow people to do online payments, online permit applications, as appropriate. Try to get, more right now, again, even our timesheets, our Excel spreadsheets that then people print in paper. And ultimately, the idea would be the most cost-effective and streamlined is a one-stop shop as much as you can, which again, also the municipal world is moving. Instead of everyone having 4 or 5 different softwares that don't talk to each other, that's what I had when I first got to the city of Brainerd. We had 5 softwares that didn't talk to each other, and so you had to duplicate processes constantly, try to get them into a one-stop shop. This also was something that was identified as a top priority during the organizational assessment. So once those were set, we also had input from Abdo. Again, they were the ones that really helped us during the transition. When Jeanette got here, and have been helping us quite a bit on the accounting side, getting things right. And then Mr. Cohen with Research Management Associates and his extensive background in this area as well. Daniel began researching different companies. In all, there were about 15 companies that were considered. And then we were able to narrow that list down to 3 based off of what our priorities were and what the companies provided. So some companies provided one service and not another. Also looking at costs. There's some services like a company called Springbrook, very robust system. For us, it would have been like $230,000, way more. It's overkill for what the city of Breezy Point needs. City of 100,000 people, Springbrook's perfect. For Breezy Point, don't need Springbrook. So we looked at all of those things, and it came down to the 3 companies that best fit the needs that we identified were Cassell, otherwise known as Civic Systems. It's actually a service of Baker Tilly, BSNA, and Edmunds GovTech. In full disclosure, Jeanette has experience. She did an integration with Cassell when she was with Big Lake, and I also did an integration with BSNA when I was in Brainerd. So we each had a familiarity with those. And then Edmunds GovTech as a new company, they aren't a new company, but a company not in this area, so trying to move into this market, that we also identified, pretty much had the best services at the right cost as well. So what we did is we invited each one to come in person for a demonstration. They came in, they were here about 4 hours, each one of them, did a full, thorough walkthrough of all the different categories or modules of their system, how they do payroll, how they do fund accounting, how they do community development, permitting, code enforcement, how they do utility billing. All of that allowed us to have some interaction with their staff. Myself, Jeanette, Peter, Daniel, Deb, all involved in those. So we would be the ones primarily working with this software. We did talk with Public Works, we did talk with PD. When it comes to this software, for both of them, they'd be more on that HR payroll side. When it comes to those departments, they have a lot more specialized software, like their records management and other CGIS. And it's actually something Mr. Cohen talked about in the future, even for Public Works, things like pavement management software. As we go down the road with CIP and streets plan, maybe that's something you want to consider. none of this kind of software handles those very niche, specialized softwares. We also had some follow-ups after those presentations to answer additional questions and such. Ultimately, I think staff, we were all very united in, we felt that Cassell served the best purpose from both a cost, how much, what they were, their implementation and annual fee costs were, as well as what they provided as a service. One of the I think the biggest things beyond being more robust on what we call the back end, the employee end, was really what do they provide on the front end? What does their customer portal look like? Again, to serve our residents. How do they apply? Can they apply for a permit online? What does that process look like? What does utility billing look like online? Is it user-friendly? Is it intuitive? Doesn't require someone with a bachelor's degree to figure it out. What kind of information can they access regarding their property, other permits that have been applied for, things like that. Essentially manage all of their accounts with the city from a one-stop shop. And we felt Casella pretty much had the best front portal for that purpose. With that, we worked with and negotiated a proposal, pretty much what we were looking for. The first year of implementation had a total cost of $92,213. This includes conversion of all of our data from Banyan, implementation into their system, in-house training, so they'd come here and train the staff once everything's ready to go, and then the first year of service. On conversion and implementation, one of the very clear questions we asked them was, what does that look like and what's the expectation from the city? We wanted to know what does the process from this contract signed to go live look like, and they handle pretty much 98% of it. If anything, they might ask you to run a report, so it's not our previous experience where they expected you to be converting your data. They handle everything. After that first year, the annual fee after that would be $16,080 that's the annual fee and then the hosting fee as well. They also believe that if they started at the beginning of the year, we'd be able to go live by the end of spring. It's about a 4 or 5-6 month process to go live. How Casella also does it, they get everything up and running, then they do training, and then they go live all as one system versus some others. They kind of went live in chunks, and we liked the idea of rip the Band-Aid. They put it all together, it's ready to go. They come in, they train you, do any adjustments during training, as you might say, hey, we like it this way instead of this way. They make those adjustments, and then go live. But they're also there for support after that, helping, they've got a very robust customer service. So if we need any changes to things, tweaks along as we go, especially for that first year, they're more than willing to do so. It's included in the service.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when this is implemented, then are you able to create any kind of payment? So let's just say, the butterfly release, there's the donation or can you input that as a payment? If there is like tournaments for disc golf, can you implement that into place? So can you create anything on your website that has a payment for something very specific? So do we get unlimited
Pretty
use
much.
of that?
You've got the most experience with Cassell, but pretty much, right?
Yes, at Big Lake, we have a long list.
Okay.
Even have just a general one.
And you also can change even to when they pay. For example, I know that was a big issue with like planning and zoning, based off of way things like the 60-day rule. Once they pay in that permit, we accept a payment, we've essentially accepted the application that day, that clock starts. So we can even set it, that was a concern because we don't want people submitting an application when we're like, whoa, we haven't had a chance to talk about this. Next thing, the clock is now going. So they even set it where they can submit an application, but they can't pay yet. So even though the application has been submitted, until a payment's been accepted, on our end, the clock hasn't started. It gives Peter some time to review the application, get back with the applicant, discuss discuss what's going on, what they're wanting to do before that formal clock starts. Because what happens is sometimes it happens maliciously. People are trying to game the system. Other times it's just people don't know the system, and then we're going, well, the clock started, and now we're having to, you know, based off of what cycle in a planning commission cycle we're in, you know, when they have to apply and different stuff. It might have changed if they missed a deadline. Well, they might have submitted later.
What about citations from the police department? How are those handled currently?
So
They
this
go into the
doesn't cover
general-
criminal.
Pardon?
This wouldn't cover like their criminal citation.
I was just curious, because if you give a citation, is there a, let's just say,
We don't get the money back for citations, for criminal citations. It goes back into the general fund or.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah,
saying
how does that work
that's handled
currently?
through the county. Like if it's a criminal citation, it's handled through the county's RMS.
oh, also, even if it's not a
Correct.
ticket, I mean, if it's a, you know,
No, we don't receive the money. They receive the money and then they send us whatever.
okay.
Our
So they pay
portion
that
is-
on a different system than what?
Yeah, I don't even know what system that would
But
be.
it'd be a criminal, but I'm saying that if you're talking about an administrative citation,
Yeah, like, I
Like
mean,
you-
anything, like, let's just say the rentals, right? Let's just say like
Yep,
the
so right
rentals
now-
didn't, you
right now,
know,
that's kind of handled again on paper.
okay.
So that's Peter. So Peter handles that end, you know, and Peter can go through, it starts with, we're in some processes right now. It starts with the nasty gram, and then there's the actual citations, and again, everything's done essentially on paper right now.
Okay.
But yeah, we could set it up that someone could pay that online if they wanted to, and if they, even if it wasn't online, allow them to pay by, say, credit card and not just cash or check.
Question, when we went down the Questica path, one of the features you liked and when council attended the demo was budgeting. Real-time residents could see it on our city website. Now, is this just the initial rollout? You won't be using it strictly for budgeting?
So this is will be our full financial software, and on the budgeting side, I'll just say from the back side, like everything that you just, you know, we've just worked through
Yep.
here.
Yes.
In their software, it's much more robust, where you actually can, again, the making of the notes, breaking line items down to make a note of like, it's this, 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 and this. It doesn't have necessarily the front end portal like Questica had nice and pretty, but what it does allow you to do is pretty much make any report that we want. Jeanette can just say, I want a report that shows me this, 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 and this. You can even export it to Excel. So if I want to make a pie chart or something, you just export that to Excel, turn it into a pie chart, and you're good to go. And we can publish that, whether it's in a budget book document or on the website. It doesn't have necessarily a budget front end like Questica did,
Correct.
but it allows us to at least do it. Right now with Banyan has none of that capability. It is this. It's a spreadsheet that looks like this.
So it eliminates your need for 5 spreadsheets to do?
Correct. It'll be able to do it
Budget.
all in the software. Department heads will be able to log in to their, the other thing is other department heads will be able to log in, easily see where their budget is at live, you know, not just month to date, but like year to date. Where's their budgets live? They'll be able to go in and put in their budgets during budget season. They just log in and can punch in their own numbers, and everyone can kind of see. The administrator can see what they've put in their budget. It'll just streamline that whole process, this process, a lot better. And also, again, having that creativity with reports. If you think, can I see it this way? We can probably create a report to show you it in whatever form you're looking to see it in.
And that annual fee, is that just strictly licensing, or does that include support, unlimited support?
So the license, so that annual fee is licensing, which does include the support. So they have a very robust customer service. They also have like tutorial pages. So if you have a question, you can just go to the tutorial page. But they have a very robust customer service. I know Jeanette can attest to that as well.
So is their customer support, is this I mean, typically there's different levels. Is this a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? I mean, if you run into an issue, is there 24/7 report? Support, is that additional fees?
No, so all the support is pretty much covered in the fee. I think the only thing that would change an additional fee is if you were asking for like the actual, you know, you want to implement a new module or actually asking for something in the actual software to change.
And that, yeah, that's pretty standard.
Yeah, but otherwise, you know, how do I run a report? Jeanette can call them and they're not going to charge us for that service. So that is covered it's one of our, under admin, getting back to the capital. Our pretty much big item ticket for admin would be to implement that software in 2025.
And where is that in
So on what your document that you have, it's page 3.
page?
So it should say on the top, it should say capital
Oh.
improvement plan administration. And then under expenditures, it'll say finance software / upgrade, and for 2025, 50,000.
Okay.
That'll be split between general capital and then sewer as well, because sewer is a big part of this.
And where is that on page 3? Under,
Here.
So expenditure detail,
So sewer is going to pay for part of it because.
okay, yeah.
2025, it's in the like pink or salmon, whatever you want to call that color. And then code, so that's 2025. So if you go to the next page, that'll be, it should say on the top, IT. IT has some very much reoccurring year after year expenses. Biggest ones there are we have getting computers and such on regular replacement schedules. Talked with On Systems and such about this. They agreed that this is a good replacement calendar. So pretty much on a council, this is pretty much tied to elections. So essentially 3-2-3-2 when it comes to laptops for council. Same thing, City Hall, so that covers all the employees here. We have 2 laptops. We're recommending 2 next year. Jeanette's and Deb's are pretty, Jeanette's is old. Should have been probably replaced a year or 2 ago. And Deb's is coming up for replacement as well. So it'd basically be 2 next year, and then every year after that it'd be 1. So it gets all the laptops on a 5-year schedule.
Okay, that was my question. That's typical. They should be
Yep.
on a 5-year schedule.
Yep, so that puts all the laptops on a 5-year schedule. Same with Public Works, they only got 2 out there, so our recommendation would place those in 2026, and then they have a longer gap. Office computers for PD, that's the same there, so 2 based off the number that they have, 2 every single year, puts them also on a 5-year schedule. Laptops and ticket printers, those are for the squads. We have replaced of 1 squad every single year, so recommendation would be a squad computer and a ticket printer also every single year. Monitors, those have a much more, I think I have this on a 7-year cycle. Again, those last a lot longer. And so I think we have budgeted for about, I want to say it's 4 or 5 sets citywide every single year. And then the other big thing under IT is for the public safety building, with City Hall would be getting the access control. Their access control is 20-something years. It's the original access control. On Systems has made comments about it being way out of date. And so our recommendation would be when City Hall gets done, it's the same system to then just do the public safety building. So that money should cover both cameras and door access control for the public safety building. Okay. Police, for 2025, annual squad replacement. Chief is requesting ballistic helmets. That's something I think they even thought of last year. I don't know if you want to comment on that or not, Chief.
It's a request by the officers, and like I've said in the past, I can't argue against safety equipment for our guys. We just had a domestic situation where a guy's running around in a neighborhood with a firearm. If they want to put some extra equipment on for their safety, I'm certainly going to try to get it for them to do so.
Lucas's, you want to describe that one, Chief?
So we have currently 2 Lucases. So you see in there, we'll need 3 in total. We have 3 people that are qualified to use them. The $20,000 for next year is to replace 1 because we have 2 currently. So that will give Kyle, Dan, and Joe all their own individual Lucas. The Lucas does the chest compressions for CPR, like perfect compressions for extended periods of time. As a matter of fact, Old Mayor Doug Rock had one on for 45 minutes, and he's alive today and doing well without any notable cognitive loss, so that's pretty impressive. And then a night vision, and then onto the speed signs, if we want to cover that now. Administrator Chansky and I were talking, and credit to Administrator Chansky because I wasn't thinking of this. If that sign is collecting data 24/7, that's public data that a citizen or someone could come in and request. I didn't think about that, and I don't like airing it, but it's a concern because Joe is the only one that has the knowledge to download all that information. It's cumbersome and time consuming. If we had 2 more signs and people get wind of this or someone just wants to be a thorn, you could have your sergeant for hours and hours every day downloading data, which would be a tremendous waste of his time. That's a great tool to look at Bushman Road and roads you're looking at doing projects, counting cars, getting data for those purposes. I don't know, and hopefully we can get some signs maybe that have an option just to display a speed without collecting data, or maybe they'd be probably quite a bit less expensive as well. Just something that displays the speed and does not collect data. My concern is if we get 3 of these and we start having a lot of requests for data, they're gonna be sitting in our garage not being used is what's gonna happen.
So anyone can request the data from the
Correct, it's
speed?
public information.
Okay.
Data.
Yeah, I think when I first, came to you guys about this, it was more so that, and there's been a number of residents in different areas who just want to see how fast people are going, and then it has been proven to slow traffic down. So I think that being able to have multiple of these, even if it's not collecting data, having them in certain areas, I think will give residents a lot of, just to be more at ease about the speeds and, what's kind of going on in that.
From my perspective, of all the residents we have in Breezy Point, most of them, the vast majority, would want that sign there. And then it becomes, everybody's calling for this. How often do you want the road department moving these speed signs around? Who gets them, who doesn't get them?
Yeah, I think that we can discuss that at a later date. I think just having them on hand, and that can be up to your discretion or the council's based on I guess that would be something that we would discuss, but I think having more than one of them is gonna be a huge benefit for the residents in different areas, especially residents that don't live on paved roads because they're having more issues with speeding and the issues that speeding on dirt roads has. So again, I think it's more of just having them on hand and then working out the details later. And then I don't think they have to collect data or turn it off if we're not.
I don't know if that is an option on the one we have currently.
Okay.
Do we have the one we have now out all the time?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
on Dove right now. It was over south of Thrain.
I guess I don't have enough information to know that we need to spend money on more than one of them. I guess,
And
right now, I don't
again-
know that I think
Again,
that.
to Mayor Zier's point, again, this is something that council can thresh out further. I know Chief and I in our discussions, one of the concern was, we did create a speed study policy, and partially the reason for that was to try to reduce the frivolous, I want a speed sign on my road. And saying, okay, if you want a speed sign, there's a process. If you request, because what we've seen is people don't just want the speed sign to have it out there. They're then going to use that to, I saw so many people, city, you need to do something. And that was one of the reasons that we created the speed study policy, was saying, okay, if you want the city to actually look at your road, here's the process to formally request it. So it's not, one resident out of 100.
Right.
And if you have the formal process, you need the data to back it up.
Yeah.
Just a speed sign will get you, nothing.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to satisfy the individual.
Yeah, I mean, I went
Kill
through it
them
on
after.
Shoreview Lane, and that was part of the reason they created the policy.
Yeah, I just think having more than one of them. I drive down Dove every day and I know it works. Like I know, and people, there are certain roads that they do go too fast. And I think that it is important, especially for having the roads committee and, redoing our ordinances and zoning, having more than one of these to kind of look at speeds around this city so that if we could also use that data to increase or decrease the speed of that road. So I think that only having one and having to move that, continuously doesn't make sense. I think having a couple that we can move around within the city makes a lot of sense. And I think residents would want it.
I will say, just from taking away maybe the pure public safety piece, one of the arguments for it, and I think Nick can attest to that, is, as we're looking at, we got the roads committee, which we're working on getting that, a meeting scheduled for them. But also, that CIP is, this is data. I think when we look at engineering of roads, obviously speeds are a big thing. That's one reason why we put the signs out on Bushman, was to see if the data that we're experiencing, this was last summer, still matched up with the speeds that Bolton and Mink did 3 years earlier. And they did. But it's something that engineers can always also use. If it's not purely from, I want a speed study, anytime we're doing a road, I guess it wouldn't hurt to put it out just to see what the speeds are at, and if the engineer just thinks that we need to make any changes to the road based off of that, the road's designed to a 30 mile, but everyone's going to 45. Well, do we need to change the design to get it back down to a 30, or do you want it to be a 45 and we need to design it to a 45? Right. So it does have those
There's multiple
benefits
uses
too. There are
There-
multiple uses.
There's no downside to having more than
I
one,
think that
in my
the
opinion.
concern, again, I think Chief's biggest concern is just that we'll need to have more discussion of who decides where they're going, when they're going, what's that process going to look like, because I do agree with Chief, once we start getting more, the amount of requests for that sign are definitely going to increase.
And I'm totally fine with that. I think just having the budget though to purchase a couple more, and maybe we decide not to, but I think at least budgeting for them based on all the things that we have going on within streets, I think is going to be beneficial for the community.
And again, Chief Sandell, currently we only have one that has the data.
Correct.
And to purchase another one of those is 10,000?
4,500.
About 5 grand,
4,500.
roughly, was kind of what we
Okay.
budgeted for, so this would be 2 more.
But one without data could be a lot less.
I don't know
We
as
don't
if
know
we
for sure,
need,
but based off of our research, they're roughly about 40, or about 5 grand is probably a good
I
budget
don't know if
for
we
them.
need 3 of them.
So coming back, that was kind of my question, is the 10,000 and then 5 and then 10, 5.
And then
is-
essentially you're putting them on a replacement schedule.
Okay, so the 10,000 was in there for the idea of purchasing potentially 2 more.
2 more, and then in 2020,
Okay.
what is it, 2029, replace the one we have, and then.
Sure, okay. That answered where that $10,000 came in for me, that I just want to clarify. But Chief Sandell, maybe you can help me a little bit more. When we had the old speed trailer, one simple yes, did that collect data? And and maybe it did, and it really didn't work that well, kind of?
It did, but it had quit functioning, and there was
Okay.
a small laptop, and it just counted cars, basically.
That's what it was, an old, yep. My question is, because I do recall it, a few times on airport as kind of more of a courtesy reminder of this is how fast you're going.
Right.
And so where I think I hear Madam Mayor is kind of saying is kind of find that sign that comes up and we can put it on the speed limit sign. I know entering Pequot Lakes, if you come in, it's flashing, here's your speed right on the speed limit sign. I could care less for any data of what people are doing, but it might be good for some of those residential areas that feel that cars are speeding, that it could be a proactive approach.
Right.
Would
So,
that be,
in my opinion, if we have one that collects the data now for the road projects, whatever, if we can get a couple other smaller ones that can just bolt onto existing signs, speed signs, or whatever, maybe not be able to be solar powered, they may be battery. Irregardless, if we can find some cheaper ones that don't collect data, that'd be great,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because,
Yeah.
like I say, part of my concern is people start coming in and requesting
Yeah.
that data.
Yeah.
We have to provide it.
And I'll say, one other thing that's came from is that the sign on Dove, we did get a data request for that data. So it is, people do request.
Oh, they
that data.
are requesting that?
Oh, yeah, I requested it for Shoreview Lane.
Well, once you get it though, once you get it, don't you have it? So then you could just,
Well, it's constantly
don't.
updating.
well, can we do a policy that you don't get the data, like, they're only once a month you're pulling the data?
Public data request, if someone submits it, it can't
Well,
be.
I would just say
everybody
don't
pulled
get
it.
any that have data then.
Right, 'cause
Yeah,
we have when someone makes a request for public data, we have a reasonable period of time to produce that data. We can't say, oh, we'll do it maybe once a month. That wouldn't work. And that's my concern.
Right.
Once people know that they do this and they can make that request, they'll be doing it every time.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Well, if I remember right, that's just not like you push a button and run a report. There was
No.
compiling of
Yeah,
data.
it usually is
And
like that.
also the setup for Sergeant Garcia, it takes a lot of time.
so-
You have to pull the data.
Yeah.
I
I
don't,
don't want to do that to you guys. I think that having one that has the data is good because wherever you are really using that and you need the data. But like, Councilman Maroney said, I think that it is a benefit, especially because we live in a tourist town. And we get a lot of people who are not from here. And there is a lot more speeding, I think, from non-residents than residents. And having, there's problem areas. And I think that just having the ability to post it on or put it on one of the signs just to curb some of it, I just think our residents would feel a lot better having, just more access to, making sure that people are watching their speed.
We'll keep that in there. That's police, parks.
before you go to parks, I'd like to go back to that first page. And I'm sure you said this, that $1 million, that's a transfer in from the capital fund, or is that a bonded?
So that $1 million, I'm saying that's like existing cash on hand. We'd take $1 million, say that we have,
Okay.
I've been saying, especially once we reimburse ourselves for the fire truck, we're anticipating ending the year with $5 million in the capital. Taking 1 million of that and designating it's for these projects and these projects alone. Like it cannot be, it is, from an accounting term, it is, Jeanette, what's the word I'm looking for? Not fixed. Not allocated. What's the, from an accounting perspective, what does the auditors always call that? Assigned, unassigned? Is it assigned? So pretty much you're saying it is assigned for this council, you cannot touch it except for that. Or city, we cannot, you'd have to make a policy to take that money away. It is set aside for this plan, and anything further in the future, whether it's streets or something else, would have to come out of not that money.
And just to address really quick, because there's been some talk about this, outside of the 5 million bonding capacity and cash that we have, there's an additional 7 million in cash in investments. Is that correct?
So a lot of our actually those those investments are actually our capital funds.
So is there a total of 12 million
No.
between? Okay.
So it's, when you look at our cash on hand plus our ability to bond, that's when we're talking about getting that 10 to 11 million.
Where did the 12 million come from initially?
Initially, way back, there actually was a period when we thought those dollars were separate.
Okay,
They're not.
okay.
So that was something Jeanette and I realized was like, we were looking at it going, this doesn't seem right.
Okay.
So that was maybe the very, very first time we discussed it.
It was, yeah.
And then we fixed that. And that's one reason why we haven't been reinvesting those funds, is because you should never lock up those funds.
Is there additional funds besides the 5 that we cannot touch at this time that are invested, or?
Our funds are maturing constantly, so we just had a big maturity recently.
Okay,
I know, based off, I had asked that same question, and David sent me the information August 8th. Now, something has matured since then, but if my math was right, $2,494,347.12 were, we can't get at that fund.
Yeah, until they mature, correct.
Until they mature.
But roughly
Okay.
5 million of it is available at any time.
right, okay, and that was just my question, because I know there were
Yep.
some just misconceptions about it.
Yep.
Or miscommunication, and there were some residents that had that, so I will direct them to listen to this
Yep, and so
meeting
again, mostly
to
when you
answer
talk about
that.
restricted, unrestricted, that's, I think I was looking for, Jeanette, restricted, unrestricted. So essentially what you would be doing is with this cash balance, again, we're saying we're restricting this to purely this use.
Okay,
Other restricted funds like debt service funds, those are restricted. If you have debt, the debt service funds can only be served for the debt, you can't use it for another purpose. Utility funds, they're restricted to utilities. You can rob your utility, but then you have to pay your utility back. We don't recommend necessarily doing that. So that's where that kind of unrestricted, restricted comes from. If the council wanted to make this cash balance different, you know, if you went $2 million, well then that 270, you could reduce the levy. I can't tell you exactly, I'd have to crunch the numbers. You know, if I put $2 million in here, whoops, that's 200, I gotta add a zero. If I put $2 million in here right now, again, we wanna make sure this whole line stays positive. If I went down to, let's see, what would $200,000 do for us? We go negative.
By 2,000.
So, you know, if I went 220, if that was, again, this is how you look at it and you go, okay, the last year goes negative, so maybe it's 225 or by 225 every single year, you float. So instead of 270, if you were to say the cash balance of 2 million, you see how that works. More upfront, less overall. So that's the discussion based off, I just based this off of, again, what we presented back in July at $1 million and then 270 every single year. If the council wanted to reduce that, that's probably, I would say keep, my recommendation would keep it as it is, and then over the next couple of months as we finalize the budget, if you want to add more cash balance to reduce that amount, you can. So, parks, this gets to your question, Madam Mayor. But
If I may, I have one more item
yes.
before we move on. Councilwoman Ball had requested costs an outdoor
you,
warning
Chief.
siren. And we were discussing that before for up Highview Campground, Lake Oswego-McKee. So I received some quotes for the wiring and the hardware. Roughly the cost for an additional outdoor warning siren will be $43,500. That does not include setting of the pole. Potentially, Growing Power will do that for us. There may be a fee, there may not. I'd have to reach out to them to see, but for the electrical and the equipment we need, it'd be $43,500 if the council chose to move forward with that.
And that is not
Thank you.
something we currently have in the plan. But that had been brought up before, so that's why Chief brought it. If you want us to add it to the plan, we can. We'll have to adjust things a little bit, but if that's something you want this year and a future year, you feel it's a priority. Then moving to parks, that's where it, again, 50,000 is what you put last year. And so from this perspective, we just put 50,000 every single year. Over the course of the plan, it's $1 million. So I think that would be much more than Parks has had consistently. They did complete the master plan. They haven't done a formal capital improvement plan like this. But if things like the community garden or things come up, they'd have funds. And if they don't use it, the funds just keep rolling. So that is one thing I do want to quick adjust here. Talk about here is one thing that this does not take into account is sale of assets or grants or different changes, right? I don't generally recommend putting those in here because you never know what those are going to be like. And those things, if we're going to get a grant or how much you're going to get for an asset, so it can really screw with your plan when things don't sell the way you're expecting or you don't get the grant. Again, as kind of Chief mentioned, you want to plan for what's it going to cost and plan on paying for it in cash. If we get a grant, fantastic. If we can sell assets as they come and have that revenue, that gets added. And then what it allows you to do is essentially 5 years. My recommendation is kind of go 5 years. And if we're planning, budget year 2030, we look at our cash balance and we're in a really good spot. Maybe we have an opportunity to reduce that from 270 to say 260 or something. Or if costs have come in higher, again, you take that time and maybe at that 5 year mark and go, well, costs are going up. These different things have happened. Maybe we actually need to consider taking that from 270 to 280. Those are discussions you kind of have. My recommendation is have that more on a 5 year basis than a year by year. Because again, the idea here is to try to keep things consistent year after year.
I have a question, as a follow-up. So last year, we did budget for the trail, as far as like whether or not, we used it. So if we are gonna continue to apply for grants and/or kind of save up, kind of similar to parks, where would that go?
We don't have that anywhere right now. That probably maybe could go under City Hall General or admin if you wanted to put money in there for just plans.
Yeah, because didn't
You
we
know-
budget like 25,000, what did we?
I
did-
think, I
we
want to
did
say we
something last
budgeted
year.
like 60,000
Yeah.
for that.
Okay,
Again, that was out of cash.
Yes.
Cash on hand. One of the things like this plan is if something like that were to come up, again, these plans are living documents. So if something comes up and you want to add it, there's a process we go by, whether it's from a department, from a staff member or from the council, figure out what years you want to do, how much it's going to cost. And then we'd have to make adjustments to the plan accordingly, whether it's moving something off, removing something from the plan, or increasing the revenue in the plan. Maybe it is hey, at the 3-year, 4-year mark, we realize our cash balance is higher than expected, so we want to add this thing. You can do that as well. If you want to add something now, you can, but again, it might adjust the calculation a bit.
I don't know as if we need to budget that this year. I think we need to get through street CIP. Where's that money coming from? Which currently there's not much. We do have a trail system within the city it's been there. Nobody's ever done anything. Has
we don't
parks.
have anything to run. And the problem is when we wait instead of doing a little bit at a time, then we end up again, it's very similar to mirroring what Mr. Chansky is putting together with the capital improvement plan. I mean, because we don't know, what's gonna come up next year, and, we did apply for the trail grant. We may apply for another one.
Which
if
we
it's
didn't get the
available.
grant,
No,
correct?
and correct, but that doesn't mean that we can't apply again, if those dollars are there. But if there's a study or if there's something that we need to do to strengthen the application, we need to be able to every year at least save a little more and more for these projects. Otherwise, what happens is they come up and then they seem like they cost so much that we didn't budget anything for them. And so I think that, looking ahead to the future of like what it is that people want to see in the city, a trail has been said absolutely something that residents want to see.
I don't disagree, but I think we need to first decide how we're gonna finance a street CIP, finance sewer expansion, focus on what it is we know we have to do as a city. Then look at that. But that's at least my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that, we did budget the 60,000. I don't think it hurts to budget a little more to add on to that, so that again, if something does come up, that we're able to say, hey, we've been saving a little bit for this project, which obviously is not, it's more of a want in this case than a need, but streets, I think, is a long-term, big-ticket item. Something like this, I think, again, saving up over time is important.
But again, if we don't find a partner to connect to, what are the chances of getting grants?
Well, the thing is like every year that you apply for the grant and you have Cross Lake working on theirs, I've been working with them. We've talked to Ideal about what a larger trail system looks like. So I think that we need to set ourselves up for the future. And I don't think that, budgeting a small amount to go into something that we know could potentially be on 11 one day and connect to Cross Lake and connect to the Paul Bunyan Trail, we need to plan for the future. And I think
Is
that.
Pequot planning for a trail to connect to
I don't think it
us?
matters, because I think that if we get our first length in the trail, like our grants are going to continue to be more available based on, having that first step. So doesn't matter what Pequot is doing at this
Well,
present
you have to
moment.
connect to
Well,
something.
yeah,
Lakeshore and Nisswa
eventually,
were
but
very
the first-
successful.
yeah, I
But they
understand that.
connected to each other.
I understand that, but the thing is we can put in our first part of it, and that is going to set us up to get bigger grants at a later date. But yes, starting is always harder, but if we don't plan for the future and set aside some funds for the things that we need, then all it does is continue to push that out.
Well, I think starting when you connect to nothing is.
Well, you have to start
the problem.
somewhere.
But again, where are you going to get the grants? I mean, I don't think there is, if communities such as Nisswa and Lakeshore, which have been very successful, have gotten the grants, but they're interconnected.
No, I've worked with them, I sat down with them, I've looked at all their pathways. Again, it takes time, and we have the opportunity still to do that first piece of it, which is the first part of it. And if we don't save for that, then it's gonna look like a bigger expenditure down the road, especially if we need to do X, Y, and Z to strengthen a grant application.
Do we have 60,000 built into the budget though now?
No.
Or we
not
don't?
For 2025.
Okay, we
That
just-
was-
But
we just-
that was for
also
24.
engineering,
24 we had it in
Yeah,
there.
no, we don't have any of that kind of in this current budget.
Okay.
if I remember correctly, engineering fees and a lot of the costs were upfront to the city. And you can be, we would be eventually reimbursed, but there was a lot of out-of-pocket upfront costs.
That's why we have to save every year and put towards that, so that when we have that, we're able to say, hey, we've been putting a little away for this thing that residents have consistently over the last 20 years said that they wanted. So from my perspective of it, it's not asking, we're not talking about a street CIP, like we're talking about putting away something so that when that day comes, we have that available to strengthen the grant application.
I don't know, I guess I think at this point, you said we can kind of move things around if we really need to, if this comes up and we actually get the grant, right?
You always
You
can.
can
Again-
change the budget
Again, part of this
and
discussion.
move things around.
Kind of next step here as well is, this isn't all of the money. Again, I think it goes back to, again, what Councilmember Jensen has said, it's the priorities. Where do you want to prioritize funds? Is it for streets? Is it for, what is it for? Again, this is just, for as the capital plan is right now, this money funds these, what we have listed here.
So the 60,000 we budgeted for last year, we did not use this year, so is that staying?
So that just stays as your cash on hand. So that was not levy dollars, that was cash on hand. So
Is that gonna be still available? I mean,
yeah, it's
I guess the point is-
when I say that $5
I mean,
million
we'd still have cash on
capital
hand if
fund,
we
like
decided to
that's-
prioritize it if we got the grant.
okay. Well, like I said, my thing is that we have to plan for the future, and I would like to continue to keep applying for grants with regards to the trail. And if there is anything though that we need to do that may cost us whatever that is to strengthen our application, it would be nice to have some of that already allocated.
At this point, I don't think I'm ready to add additional funds, but keep in mind the Parks Fund of $50,000 a year, that's a request back to City Council for those funds to be expensed. So if we start moving forward with the trail system, we could easily say in Parks, we know we have 50 this year because budget season already went through. We are going to make sure that we take 25 and allocate for trail system next year or
Yeah,
or
and
for
we
this
can,
year.
I mean, if that's part of parks,
So-
like, that's totally fine. My whole thing with it is that it's nice to have this, and if we want to have that be a part of parks, that's totally fine. But I don't want to, stop trying to get a grant, to do that. But I also, don't want us to, say, well, we didn't budget for that, so we can't pursue that. But, so basically every year, if they don't spend anything,
Just
after,
rolls over to the next, yeah, exactly. So cash, the idea is
it's gonna build up basically their,
things will build up.
okay.
Yeah. So Public Works, there's no, anything specific scheduled for 2025. As was discussed in July, we did figure out what things would be covered. I asked Joe what amongst his items would be covered in sewer. So we did break that out, so that would be covered under sewer, the sewer fund. So there are one specific piece of equipment. So I said the second half of the financial software, so we already talked about that. And then the Bobcat, I provided you some information from Joe about that, his recommendation to replace that. I think originally on the plan, the plan was to replace the Bobcat? And then you think you swapped them, Joe, I think, right? The Tool Cat said replace that first, Bobcat's good to go for another couple of years?
I think it was probably the tractor.
Yeah, you're right, it was the tractor. We pushed the tractor a year, based off of a lot of maintenance that's been put in the Tool Cat last year. We thought, I think, Joe, you recommended that, just replace the Tool Cat now. It was scheduled to replace in a year or two anyway, just replace it now and save ourselves maintenance cost.
And with the Toolcat, I need to visit with the dealership, but they're notorious for high maintenance costs. The dealership has indicated do like a 3-year trade-in, so it stays under warranty the whole time. You turn things around quicker, your trade's higher. We'd probably have a little bit more stable operating costs to budget, because I think it was last year or the year before, the head gasket went out. That was in the teens of thousands. This year we're like 9,000 into figuring out air conditioning. We had one in Nisswa. They're kind of a complex little machine, but cities like us and everywhere love them. They're real handy. So.
Joe, you say it's an everyday piece of equipment.
Yes, you're wrong. We've had it. It's a fairly new piece. I was using it on a burial Saturday, and I think it's in the like 1,500 hours, which is more than I expected we would use it, put it like that.
So we were able to, that would be covered under the sewer fund, not this capital. So, again, look at 270, so now it's gonna bring us back to, I'm gonna go back to these two line items that I discussed before. So this goes back to, if you go back to now this document, the preliminary budget under other government, it's like page 4. So what we did is, if you remember previously, so last year there was $582,000. That was that transfer, 572, 582. That was comprised of old debt payment, about $230,000 from old debt payment, 350 something. I have it in here. 350 for previous road, and then all the capital. So there was the capital from Public Works, the capital from PD admin that was used to be under their individual departments are now going to be moved into kind of that one bucket, again, that 270 every year to cover capital. So that came out to a total, when I added it all together, about $702,000. So what I did here is I've subtracted the 270 for the CIP, roughly the CIP levy. So that's the amount that we need every single year to cover all of our capital year over year. And then under our debt fund, which is the 300 fund, page probably, I would say, what is that, page 6, I think. 280,000, that's based off of the numbers we got from Baker Tilly, would cover, would be the City Hall bond payment if you chose to bond all of City Hall. So again, that's the high end. Your debt fund is something you have to levy for. The 135 in here for the ladder truck, that's not included in the levy because that's we will invoice the Pequot Lakes Fire District for that payment. So took out the 270 for the CIP, took out 280 for debt for City Hall right now, because that, if you bonded the whole thing, again, if you choose to bond less, use some cash, obviously, then those numbers adjust. So once we take out those things, we're still left with $152,000 that is unallocated right now. It just goes into your capital funds, again, build that up, use that towards, maybe that's towards a Bushman bond down the road. Again, at this point, first Bushman bond payment wouldn't be due until 2026. If you bond it next year, depending on when you bond it, there might be an interest payment, but we do have some money in the debt fund that could pay for that as well, but that'd be minimal. Or the other option, and I sent this to you, and I know Joe and I want to discuss, is you could use that towards streets. Designate that as maybe some of that seeding money towards streets, whether it's towards the CIP, you know, a streets levy year over year, or to actually start doing some street projects next year. I sent you the numbers, some of the things that Joe sent. And I know, Joe, I'll hand it over to you if you just want to talk to the council what we talked about regarding what you'd like to propose for next year.
And again, David, it's under the 300 fund that you're looking at?
So that 152, sorry, that's back on the general, that page 4. The 300 fund, that's where the debt payment for City Hall. So I took it from the general fund.
Okay.
So again, when I talked about earlier about existing money would pay for that bond, this is what I'm talking about. This line item, again, we moved that money, instead of it going here, we moved it to the debt fund, the debt service fund, because that's where debt belongs. So we subtracted the 270, subtracted the 280, and that's how we get 152 of currently unallocated. AKA, we don't have a specific purpose for it at this point. So, Joe.
Sure. So for my budget, you know, the big ticket item is talk about a dedicated road fund. You know, that was my primary priority in the organizational assessment. You know, over the past dozen years I've been here, there's 18 roads that, you know, either got paved in sewer, repaved, that sort of thing. I came up with my estimate for a very low frills paving, roughly $300,000 a mile. You know, 2 miles, 600,000. I conferred with Dave Reese on those numbers. I initially came up with them in 2021. He said they're solid. He would stand right by them. You're always going to have fluctuations. You know, there can be a number of things, but that's basically repave what we have the way it is, not doing a ton of fixing or adding sidewalks or curb and gutters. Yeah, and I just figured, you know, the council approved the road plan. They agreed to create a road committee. Established funding would allow the committee to make recommendations, act annually. That's pretty much how Lakeshore does things. Couple $100,000 a year. Go out, tour the roads, pick them out, talk to the administrator how much money's in the fund. Some years you do 100,000, some years you do 400,000. It does, my gut tells me if it's part of the operating budget, it's going to survive different councils a little more closely. Like it won't be up for bond, which, will it do everything? No, it won't, but it would, you know, 1 mile a year, people would notice, absolutely. 2 miles would be tremendous, but there's a range in there for a reason. And then I did talk to a handful of the road committee guys as they were reaching out to me, and they want to do projects. They don't want to just sit around and, you know, they want to see things happen. So that's why I came up with the budget that I shared with David, and sounds like he shared with you. So any questions?
David, back to that page 4. That was, what
Transfer.
line, yeah, the
Transfer to
720,
other
that
fund.
text is cut off, so,
Yeah, so pretty much, I'll pull it up there. So it's,
Yeah.
so again, we took that previous 582. I also added the previous capital, so like the squad, annual squad payment that was previously under public safety, the money that Public Works always put to capital every year. We put those all together, and that's how we came up with 702. And then I subtracted the 270 for equipment, subtracted 280 for City Hall, you're left with 152. That's how I got that 152. So again, that's not all your money, that's just unallocated money in this budget. You know, if you put $1 million towards your CIP, again, I'm estimating you still have roughly $4 million left over to play with in your current capital fund. Whether that's to, you know, cover Bushman or you want to seed a streets plan, however you want to do that, you still have that money in addition to this. This is just saying you have $152,000 in this budget that currently is not allocated to a specific purpose. You could remove it and reduce the levy by $150,000. You could designate it for another purpose. You could increase it. It just doesn't have a purpose today.
I think at this point, it should stay in for streets.
Yeah,
That would be my
I would
rec-
agree.
I would
feel like
recommend
that's
leaving it
been
in.
like the plan for a while, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's still, Joe's looking, you know, for a minimum, you know, 1 mile is 300,000.
I wonder if you can work up to that, like in the next couple of years.
And
like
one
if-
thing, Joe
I
and
know
I
we've
dis-
done that in the past,
One thing,
like-
and Joe and I discussed, obviously with the streets plan that Woodstock's gonna be putting on, putting it all together, the next step would be, once that's done, you've got the total number for that plan, talking about how do you wanna finance that plan. That still can all happen, because we're talking multi-year there. I think one thing that Joe was saying is, can we at least get some money, his request
Correct.
for 2025?
Yeah.
Whether
Yes.
that's not money, it's this money, if you want to dedicate money from the capital fund for that purpose, like cash on hand for that purpose. I think that was really the main request is at least get, you know, if we can get the ball rolling on something, again, that helps kind of that snowball effect of we're doing something, we're gonna get the formal streets plan ironed out next year, but at least we're starting.
I mean, I think at a minimum, we need to try and get to that 300,000 for streets.
I mean, I feel like if you do 152 this year and planned on, you know, the next year, like the goal being then allocate another 152,000 the next year, you know, you're slowly going to get there. I mean, I don't know if we want to add another, unless you're using cash on hand.
Yeah, or
Well,
add
looking at the
another-
cash on hand, the funds that haven't matured, is there money there, 150, you know, to take?
300 for
Then we're
next
still
year, is
not-
what you're
Yeah,
saying?
300
I would
for
like to
next
see
year.
next year 300, just because, again, I believe in this slowly building up, getting the ball rolling. So I would be in favor of trying to get to 300.
And then
in
next year, still trying to allocate another 150,000 more, because eventually you'd want to have it allocated and not trying to use cash on hand, I guess is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get
And
at.
Yeah,
and I just
I
wanna,
agree.
one thing I just want to make sure, again, the council's also keeping on the radar is Bushman.
Yeah.
So if you do Bushman, like this is not taking into account Bushman.
Right.
So, you know, would you, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you want to use this 152 for what Joe's requesting? Save this 152 for a potential Bushman bond?
I would rather see that go towards what Joe,
And then
Is
if you need to
discussing.
if you need to bond Bushman, just add that to the levy
yeah,
at that
that's what
time.
I would probably look at. I think that having that, I think it would be great to just put that towards what he's, and that's just my opinion, and I don't know what you guys
But we
think
still
about it.
haven't used all our, I mean, that's part of the bonding capacity.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we can factor that in if we're trying to use some additional cash on hand. Like, do we want to actually allocate another 152 or 150,000? Or do we want to, if Bushman needs to move forward, do we decide to use some of that cash on hand for the first year for Bushman without adding it to the levy? I mean, that's an option too.
Because Bushman really would not hit the levy until 2026.
I like the idea of getting started, though. I mean,
Well, and out of all the funds, you know, the Northland, the multi-bank, Wells Fargo.
There's plenty
everything's-
enough money that if you wanted to call this plus 150 from SCAP, it won't hurt you.
yeah.
And then 2026, reconsider how you, again, but that point, that time, well, you know, Bushman's underway, you've thoroughly talked about the CIP and how you want to fund it.
Yeah, I think just something to get it started.
So we,
So 152 plus
So to clarify, the
150 in capital?
150 that we have in the 152, that could be the bond payment though for Bushman.
depending on how much cash down you put for Bushman. It's not,
Yeah.
the 152 is not gonna cover all of Bushman. I would say 152,000 a year, based off of previous estimates I've received from Baker Tilly, that'll cover a roughly $1.5 million estimate.
Yeah, I don't know if I like.
So then you would need to, use roughly 2.5 million on top of that in cash to cover Bushman. Now then you still have roughly $1 million and a half left in your capital fund. Now again, kind of what I mentioned before, Bushman's bond payment likely won't hit based off of when you bond are going to bond Bushman. That the first payment was not going to hit until 2026. So if you leave this in here, you can leave it in there saying we're going to use this for Bushman, but otherwise it's just, again, it's going to go, we're going to take that 152 and just put it in the capital fund and save it.
Yeah, and I think that's
Or the
what's
other
gone
one.
wrong in prior years, because I think we thought we were having a dedicated road fund
Yes.
when we
Correct.
kept this money in the budget, so.
Versus what I'm
Agreed.
hearing is say, well, let's actually just use it this year.
Yeah.
And then in 2026, we'll have a much more educated discussion because the streets plan will be done. We'll have discussed how we want to do that. We'll know exactly where we're at with Bushman, all of that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, and
that
to
makes
your point,
sense.
Rebecca, you're 100% right. That's exactly
So-
what
And then you
happened.
want to
Like, I
add, are you
feel like there
saying you
should already
wanna-
be a line item for
You
Bushman.
thought you were doing that.
Yeah.
So are you
Yeah.
saying you want to add 150 of cash on hand to make this 300?
I would be in favor of doing that to get started.
Well, this is talking levy dollars, correct?
So right now, this 152 is levy dollars.
Half of it's levy,
So-
half of it's
So
cash.
152 is going to be going to, we're going to now make 152 part of the budget for
So
road
Let me
improvement.
show you how I would do this. So what I'm hearing, under Public Works right now, there already is I'd probably just put it for now, there's a road improvements. I'd put $300,000 here. I'd go up here, back to this line, oops, I missed it, I skipped it. This line item, I'm just gonna make that 0. Whoops. I'm gonna make that line item 0, and then in revenue, transfers from other fund, I'm gonna make this 155,000. So 5,000 from, we'll say it's 5,000 from cemetery and 150,000 from capital for streets and for road improvements. That's how that's done. So I'm putting $300,000 in an expense, but I'm putting additional 150 in a revenue. So that's how that works. So it kind of counterbalances and ends up back to where we are.
So, yeah, the levy still ends up being the same number.
It roughly ends up being that same number,
Yeah.
which, once we get down to that, is current levy, and then this is made up of general fund, the debt fund, which again, the debt fund number, that's not new dollars, because we just moved it from general, the existing money from general to debt. So it's your levies, your general fund, your debt fund, your EDA fund, which is, well, I'm leaving it the same as last year, $3,600. We give that to Bladek. And your cemetery fund, there's $20,000 we've been levying for the cemetery. So right now, that levy is $3,426,958. That is a 6.6% increase over last year. So the new dollars would be $213,448 of new dollars. Again, where most of that increase is coming from is last year. Again, I mentioned before, when you did the wages, you moved $125,000 in as a one-time transfer to kind of cushion that
Oh,
increase.
yeah, we did do that.
So that came off this year.
Do you remember that?
So if you were to put that money back in, the actual increase is only like, in operating, it's only like 2.5%. So the main piece of that is that one-time transfer coming off.
Okay.
I did try to do my implication spreadsheet, which I've done before for you, which kind of try to figure out implication of the taxes. The problem is, I'm really hesitant to show this only because the tax capacity number is a very big number when it comes to how we calculate tax rate. It's your levy and your tax capacity. I asked Crow Wing County for it twice, and they finally got back to me today and said, I'll have it for you tomorrow. So that's fantastic. Normally I have it way earlier because they would provide it to me at the time of Board of Equalization, which was done in like April. Well, we did open book this year, so they never gave it to me.
Oh, yeah.
So then I asked them for it multiple times, and then they finally got back to me and said, I can get that for you tomorrow. And I said, fantastic, my meeting's tonight. But I will show you this, is last year we had about a 13% change. The year before that if we just had a 10% change increase, our market value has always gone up. I've never seen it go down.
With 20 new homes too, right? And those are gonna be,
And it's always a year, you're always kind of like 2 years behind
Okay.
with this. And 2 years ago, we built 30 homes. So if you did just a 10% increase, you are looking at a lot of people's taxes going down. Not everybody's. Based off, again, these are the exact same 20 properties. 20 properties as I did last year. They include all of yours, are buried in here. But I felt, again, this was a pretty decent representation of most of our community. Obviously, there's a lot of people in between. But a lot of people would see a reduction.
that's awesome.
If we had a 10% increase in our tax capacity, I will know tomorrow exactly what that number is, and then I can provide that to you, and then be able to present that on September 3rd as well. But of course, as it is, they got back to me at 3 o'clock and said, I can get that for you tomorrow. Been
I like
asking
it.
for that number. So I don't know at this point, we're 2 hours in. The rest of this budget, you have it. Again, the rest of it is non-levy dollars, so it does not affect what you're gonna adopt on September 3rd. You can go through it if you'd like, if you want some time. Again, most of it's minor. The one thing we will point out, Joe and I had a discussion of, and obviously we have Baker Tilly is working on the rate study. We are gonna be, probably recommending an increase this year for sewer rates of something. Just because when you look at what we're what we're currently kind of gonna bring in versus current operating, we're like barely breaking even. And that doesn't account for the future. So I think we probably are gonna be recommending an increase. I'm not ready right now to talk to what that should be. Joe presented, when was that, back in May? I think it was May. He presented his survey he did of the surrounding communities. We all showed where we were way below everybody. Obviously, we don't want to shock anyone with like a $25 a quarter increase in 1 year, but I think we probably will be recommending some kind of increase for 2025. We'll have to look at that more, see what Baker Tilly is recommending. Again, that's not something that has to be done on September 3rd. It's need to be done probably by December. We like to give people a heads up that's going to happen. So over the next couple months, we'll have that discussion. But we did want to give you a heads up that we're likely going to be recommending an increase in utility fees this year.
And I've seen a lot of comments, the sewer expansion is going to be funded by, obviously, the residents that use the sewer. For
Correct.
some people, we're assuming the entire city
Correct.
would be paying for it, and
Yep.
that's not
It's
correct.
a user, yep. So
It's user.
it's be the sewer fund would bear that burden. Sewer fund's an enterprise fund. So user fees are what fund that. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at needing to up. And it'll probably be, more than likely, we're going to be increasing it every year for the next few years, but the idea would be smaller increases each year versus large increases in 1 or 2 years. Let's do over 5. Because we still are a couple years away from doing that project. I will say, just the FYI, when you see in the sewer capital fund, We did put money in here for the terminal and Red Oak extension, which we'll be discussing on September 3rd. So there's money in there to do that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
So this is the preliminary budget, roughly about a 6.7 pending any changes between now and September. Again, we can always go lower, but we cannot raise
Yep,
it.
so right now, as it is today, we'd be bringing on September 3rd a resolution to adopt a preliminary levy of roughly $3,426,958. Again, yes, Councilman Maroney, before December, when you adopt the final, it can go down from there. You just cannot go up from there. Anything else for me this evening? Again, if there's anything else you want some follow-up or want to make sure I hit on September 3rd, please let me know so I can make sure I hit those things during my budget presentation on September 3rd.
I have one thing to add, just clarification. If you happen to see it, currently it says our capital outlay is at 176%. The reason for that is our public safety aid that we receive from the state. When we use that, it gets coded under our capital. So all the items that were purchased with the state aid goes in there. So it's not that we're not 176% over. Just want to make sure people knew.
Great. All right, anyone else?
Otherwise, I think I've got a number of things, specifically on the finance, HR services. We'll continue to do more research into those as well.
Can you let us know when you hear back from the county? Can you send us all an
Yeah,
email?
yeah, like I said,
I'd like to know what
yeah, I'll let you know.
percentage, because
Once
that
I-
is something
I-
that we could then relay to residents, right? So even if there is a 6 point, because people get scared based on the percentage.
Yep, so I'll send that,
and
once I
not
get that from the
what's really
county.
going on.
Yeah, once I get that from the county, and get that calculated into my sheet, I'll share that with you. And then also, again, there'll be something I'll include as part of my budget presentation on September 3rd as well.
Perfect.
So I guess again, September 3rd, reminder, is a Tuesday, as Labor Day is Monday. So council's on Tuesday. If you show up here on Monday, no one's going to be here.
Perfect. Thank you.
So with that, thank you very much. And let me know if there's any other questions or comments you have ahead of September 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.